My beloved Noah's Stories family, before anything else, let me whisper a gentle prayer over you. May your heart be gently held today, your mind find rest, and may love come to you in quiet ways, a smile, a breeze, or a warm memory. Though you won't hear my voice in today's video, every word was written by me, with all the love I always pour into your life. My brother Henry will be reading the story for you while I take a little time to rest. If you're new here, welcome to the family. Please stay until the very end, because maybe, just maybe, this story is what your heart has been waiting for. And if you can, please say a small prayer for me. No fancy words needed, just something kind and sincere. You're not just my audience, you are a part of my heart. Now, take a deep breath and let Henry lead you into the story. Elena Moore never imagined her life would take this kind of turn. To her, everything had its rightful place. Teaching art at Harbor Ridge High School, her small cedarwood cottage by the sea where she painted most afternoons, and quiet evenings spent with chamomile tea and half-read novels. She wasn't looking for anything else. Stability was her form of peace. Until one crisp autumn morning, her phone buzzed with a message that made her heartbeat stumble. "We need to talk. Tonight. My place. It's important. Julian." The name alone made her chest tighten. Not with romantic longing, but something older, deeper. Julian West, her childhood best friend. The boy who used to sit alone in the back of their art class, now a prominent biotech investor in Boston, and the one person who had never truly left her life. They had grown up together, from drawing with chalk on the sidewalk to handwritten letters during his years away at college. Life had pulled them apart in distance, but never in heart. So that evening, Elena left Harbor Ridge, wrapped in a dark blue wool coat, and caught the train to Boston, stepping into a world that felt both foreign and achingly familiar. Julian's penthouse sat at the top of a sleek glass building in the center of the city. Everything inside was tastefully elegant. Modern furniture, warm ambient lighting, soft jazz humming from built-in speakers. But what struck Elena most was Julian himself. Raw, tired, and almost fragile. So different from the polished power player the world knew. He greeted her with a small, unsure smile, fingers curled around a mug of cold coffee. There were no grand gestures, just a look that said he'd been waiting for this moment longer than he admitted. Dinner passed in a gentle hush. Pasta, toasted bread, 2 half-drunk glasses of red wine. They talked about school, her students, the new vaccine trial his lab was running. It felt like every other time they'd reunited. Easy, honest, until she set her fork down and he looked up, his gaze no longer avoiding hers. "I need to ask you something, and I know it's going to sound crazy." Elena nodded, her pulse suddenly loud in her ears. "I want a child," he said. "Not someday, now, and not with just anyone, with someone I trust." The air shifted. Elena opened her mouth, but no words came. Julian rushed to fill the silence. "I'm not asking you to marry me. This isn't about romance. You know me. Dating never works. They fall in love with the spotlight, not the person." He stood pacing slowly near the floor-to-ceiling windows. "But you've always seen through that. You've seen me. And I know this is huge. If you say no, nothing changes. We're still us. I promise." Elena sat still, fingers curling around the cloth napkin in her lap. She didn't know what startled her more, the proposal itself, or the tenderness with which he offered it, as if it were sacred. The first time Elena met Julian West, they were just 2 fourth graders, strangers, misplaced, and belonging nowhere. He sat quietly near the stone bench behind the town library, wearing an oversized coat and pristine white sneakers that looked untouched by dirt. Elena had noticed him for days, sometimes in the schoolyard, sometimes wandering near the harbor trail. He never played with the other kids, Never joined the noisy circles, never smiled. There was something in the way he folded into himself that felt familiar, as if both of them were waiting for someone to speak first. One chilly winter afternoon, as flurries settled on the old stone steps, Elena approached him with 2 cups of hot cocoa and a hazelnut cookie wrapped in a napkin. "I'm not asking if you're hungry," she said, gently placing the cookie between them. "I just thought, maybe you need someone today." Julian didn't answer. But a few minutes later, as Elena hummed along to a jingle from a cereal commercial, he quietly broke the cookie in half and took a bite. That was the beginning. Their friendship was never loud. It grew like roots underground, steady, silent, unseen. While Elena's mother worked night shifts as a nurse and her father tinkered endlessly with their leaky roof, Julian often sat in her kitchen doing homework or sketching beside her. In 6th grade, his parents divorced. His mother moved into town and opened a small, humble bookstore. Elena was the only one who knew how Julian spent nights curled in the back of that shop long after the lights had gone out, reading the same dog-eared novel over and over. They spoke their own language, sticky notes on the fridge, wordless glances when one of them was low, and a kind of trust that never needed proof. But things began to change by high school. Julian's brilliance earned him a spot at a Yale summer science program. Then when he was 16, tragedy struck. His mother passed away suddenly from a brain aneurysm. The news broke on an early summer morning. Elena got a text from a classmate. "Turn on the TV. West Bookstore is sealed." She ran to the hospital without thinking, because Julian would need her. He sat there, red-eyed, hands locked together, silent. Elena took a seat beside him, holding his hand. They didn't speak for 3 hours, but even in silence, they were everything to each other. When Julian got a full ride to Yale, Elena was the first to celebrate, painting a small picture of a lighthouse in the dark, with a note underneath. "When you don't know where to go, follow the light." And Julian always did. Though they lived in different cities, walked different timelines, they still called every Sunday. Elena sent him letters, sometimes with pressed leaves from Harbor Ridge tucked inside the envelope. Julian once mailed her the first book he bought with his scholarship stipend, writing inside the cover, "For Elena, the one who sees what others overlook." All those years they weren't in love, at least not yet. They were simply the only ones who never left. It took Elena 3 days to breathe normally again after that evening in Boston. 3 sleepless nights filled with the sound of crashing waves and the dull glow of street lights sneaking through her window blinds. Inside her swirled a storm, part logic, part something far older and quieter. Maybe intuition, maybe trust. She walked the cobblestone path along the coast for hours, hands numb without gloves, mind blank. But her heart was not. Her heart was full of images. Julian by the window, eyes heavy but not hopeless, his question echoing like a soft refrain. "I'm not asking for love, just trust." In the end, she knew she couldn't carry this alone. On Wednesday morning, Elena brought cinnamon waffles and ginger tea to Miss Everly's porch, her former high school principal, and the one person who had always seen Elena as something more than a quiet art teacher. They sat on the woven gray bench under the sloping awning, dry leaves dancing around steaming mugs. Elena told her everything. No filters, no pretty versions, just honesty and fear. Ms. Everly didn't interrupt. She listened, nodded, and when Elena finally fell silent, she reached over and held her hand. "Love has many shapes, Elena. Not all of them begin with passion. Some begin with trust and grow from there." Elena didn't reply, but her eyes stopped looking away. A week later, Elena returned to Boston. No warning, no luggage, just a notebook in her bag and a trembling heart. Julian opened the door, concern flickering in his eyes as he saw her standing there in her gray coat and green scarf. "We'll do this," she said, "but we do it together, as friends." As partners. Julian didn't answer right away. He simply placed a hand over his chest as if trying to keep his heartbeat steady. "Thank you," he whispered, "for trusting me, for choosing me." They began the process. Medical exams, consultations, finding the right clinic. Julian took care of everything, canceling meetings to accompany her to every appointment. When Elena grew anxious, he brought her back to Harbor Ridge, walking with her through the pine woods where they used to play. When she grew scared, he held her hand. Not tightly, not loosely, just enough to remind her she wasn't alone. One evening, back at Julian's apartment after a long day at the clinic, Elena opened her notebook and showed him sketches from her students, handwritten thank you notes from parents, and a few private journal entries. "I always thought I'd fall in love first," she said softly, "and then become a mother." Julian looked at her for a long moment, then replied, "Maybe you still will, just not in the way you expected." Elena didn't answer, but she didn't look away either. The first attempt didn't work. Elena had braced herself for the waiting, but she hadn't expected it to feel so hollow. She didn't cry. She just sat alone in her little wooden kitchen in Harbor Ridge, hand resting gently over her belly as if still holding hope. There was no physical pain, but her heart felt like it was being wrung tight. Julian called that evening, as he always did. His voice was softer than ever. "I made ginger soup. Not great, but it's warm." Elena chuckled faintly. She didn't know why she agreed to take the next train to Boston. Maybe it was the ginger. Maybe she was just too tired to keep walking this alone. It was raining when she arrived. Not a storm, but a soft, steady drizzle, the kind that plays like a sad tune on repeat. Julian greeted her in a worn sweater and house slippers. He didn't ask questions, just handed her tea, played an old jazz record, and let her sit there in silence. They watched a silly movie together. Neither remembered the plot. As the light flickered across the screen, Elena felt something heavy settle in her chest. "I thought I'd feel different," she whispered, "but I just feel empty." Julian didn't speak right away. Instead, he turned toward her with a look that held no pity, just something profoundly human, deeply knowing. "You're not empty," he said softly. "You're carrying more courage than most people ever touch. Even if no one sees it, I do." She laughed, a small, broken sound, like cracking glass. But then the tears came, not from sadness, but from finally being seen. "What if it doesn't work?" she asked. "What if this is it?" Julian hesitated, then answered, "Then we try again, and again. I'm here, with you." Silence followed, but not the awkward kind. The kind that pulls you closer. "Why me?" she asked. The question slipped out without planning. Julian exhaled slowly. His eyes never left hers. "Because no one else has ever made me feel home." Elena didn't speak. She simply stood and walked over to the window where Julian had been standing moments ago. She joined him, shoulder to shoulder. Neither of them said anything, but the distance between them began to dissolve. Not with words, but presence. Julian turned to her, his hand lifted slowly, fingers brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. His touch was warm, trembling. "Tell me to stop if you want me to." She didn't. She leaned in, just slightly, and that was enough. Their kiss was slow, deliberate, like the moment had been waiting years for its chance. Every move felt like it came from another time. Not rushed, not urgent. Just a quiet breaking open. They moved to the bedroom as if they were carrying something sacred. Julian lifted her gently, cradling her like she was made of something fragile and precious. Every touch was a wordless vow. That night they made love, not out of desire, but to reach something deeper, something holy. And when it was over, when they lay wrapped in each other under the soft glow of the room and the rain still pattering gently outside, Elena tucked her face into Julian's chest and whispered, "Nothing about this feels like a mistake." Julian kissed her hair, his voice barely audible. "Because it's not." 3 weeks after that rainy night, Elena sat alone in the bathroom of her Harbor Ridge home, her hand wrapped tightly around the pregnancy test, like it was evidence of a dream too fragile to believe. 2 lines, clear, undeniable. She hadn't told Julian, not because she didn't trust him, but because she didn't yet trust herself to feel anything concrete. Her body had been changing, more sensitive, humming with something deep and bright. But her mind hadn't caught up. She needed to be sure. She needed one real moment before she could face what was happening. When the timer buzzed, Elena took a deep breath, flipped the test over, and everything changed. The tears came fast and hard, not from fear, but from something bigger. Awe, gratitude, and joy so immense it made her tremble. That evening, she tucked the test into a soft velvet pouch, her grandmother's from years ago, and drove to Boston. She didn't text, didn't call. She just knew that if she didn't say it aloud, her heart might burst. When Julian opened the door, he froze seeing her standing there. Wind-blown hair, trembling hands, eyes red with emotion. "Elena, what's wrong?" She didn't answer, just handed him the pouch. Julian opened it, and his gaze locked onto the object inside. "Is this?" She nodded. Naturally, not from the clinic. It just happened. In that moment, Julian didn't speak. He just looked at her, like the entire world had collapsed into one teardrop hanging from his lashes. Then he stepped forward and held her tight, holding her as if he might lose her. "You're pregnant," he whispered. "You're really carrying our child." Elena leaned into him, soaking his shirt with silent tears. "I didn't know how to feel at first. I was scared. Scared it would ruin what we had." Julian pulled back, cupping her face with both hands. "Elena, this doesn't ruin anything. If anything, it makes everything clearer. Because there's something I've needed to say too." He took a breath. His voice trembled. "I love you." She didn't respond right away. She just looked at him. Really looked. Not as the boy she once knew, or the friend who had always shown up, but as the man standing in front of her now, unguarded, raw, and completely real. "I think I've loved you for a long time," Julian said. "I just didn't realize, or I didn't let myself believe it." Elena laughed through her tears. "Me too. I've always chosen you, even before I knew I was doing it." They held each other beneath the quiet hum of city light. No music, no declarations, just a love finally called by its true name. That night they sat side by side on the couch, Julian's hand resting gently over her belly. There was something so delicate, yet grounding in that touch. "You want to know something crazy?" he murmured. "What?" "I already love this baby." Elena smiled, nodding. "Me too. And I love you." Julian kissed her forehead, not because of the plan, not because of the child, but because you're the dream I never dared to draw. News spread through Harbor Ridge like fire catching dry leaves. Elena didn't know exactly who first spotted her, stepping out of the black SUV parked outside the school, or who whispered to whom about the soft curve forming beneath her sweaters. But within a week, she could feel it. The eyes, the sidelong glances, the hesitant greetings, the questions left hanging in the air. A colleague no longer invited her for afternoon tea. A neighbor who once brought her banana bread now crossed the street when she passed. Harbor Ridge was a small town, and small towns don't always handle different very well. People didn't understand how a quiet, private art teacher like Elena Moore, someone who had never even had a public relationship, was suddenly pregnant with the child of a Boston billionaire. They didn't see the years of silence. They didn't know the roots. They saw the surface, and from that, they built their own version of her story. She must have planned this all along. She looked innocent, but you never know. Honestly, Julian probably got trapped. Elena tried not to let it get to her. She focused on her students, on morning painting sessions, on the rhythm of a tiny heartbeat in her first ultrasound. But during the monthly parent meeting, one mother spoke loudly enough for all to hear. Is it appropriate for someone in her situation to continue teaching? The room fell quiet. Elena sat still, but inside her heart cracked. The next morning, the principal called her in. Some parents have voiced concerns, she said gently, almost apologetically. A short leave might give things a chance to calm down. Elena nodded. She didn't argue. She understood. But understanding doesn't mean it didn't hurt. That afternoon, she sat on her porch, sea breeze brushing her cheeks, eyes fixed on the empty road ahead. Julian arrived to find her clutching the letter in her lap. He didn't say anything at first. He sat beside her, jaw clenched as he read the words. I'm going to fix this. Don't, she said quickly. If you storm in with power and money, they'll think I used you. I don't want that. Julian held her hand tightly. You shouldn't have to walk through this alone. I know, but I need them to see my strength, not just yours. He was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. Then let's show them our love. No hiding, no apologies. That Sunday, they walked into the old church where Elena had grown up. All eyes turned, but Julian held her hand firmly, unwavering. When the pastor asked, does anyone have a testimony to share today? Julian stood. No speech, no dramatics. Just this. I used to think I understood what matters most. I was wrong. Because the most important things in life aren't built in boardrooms. They're built in patience, in the ones who stay when everyone else leaves. And I found that. Elena cried through the entire service. That night, lying curled beside him, she whispered, I don't care what they say anymore. I won't shrink to fit inside their small view of me. Julian smiled, his hand resting on her belly. You were never meant to shrink. You were made to shine. One May morning, Julian asked Elena to take the day off. There's something I want to show you, he said, casually but with a glint in his eyes that felt different. They drove out of the city, through winding roads shaded by tall trees, sunlight flickering through the windshield like silent laughter. Elena didn't ask too many questions. She was used to Julian's surprises, and more than that, she trusted him. They pulled up to a quiet house on the edge of a suburban neighborhood outside Boston. Soft cream siding, wide front porch, sea blue shutters, and a red maple tree shedding leaves onto the lawn. What are we doing here? Elena asked, brows raised. Julian took her hand, eyes shining. It's ours, I bought it. Elena blinked. You bought a house? I know it's sudden, but I wanted us, to have a place that wasn't temporary, a space that belongs to us, for you, for the baby. She looked at the house again. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't grand, but it was warm, and it felt like home. If you don't like it, I can sell it, Julian added quickly, as if afraid he'd overstepped. But Elena shook her head, eyes glistening. You don't need to, it's perfect. They walked inside, polished hardwood floors, the faint scent of fresh paint. Julian pointed to each room like he'd already imagined their lives there. The cozy living room with a rocking chair, the sunlit kitchen where Elena could teach their child how to shape clay. A small nursery at the end of the hallway, wallpapered in soft shades of blue. In that nursery, Elena stood by the window, the golden light glowing over her rounded belly. Julian came behind her, wrapping his arms gently around her waist, hand resting where their son grew day by day. We should name him, Elena said softly. Have anything in mind? Julian asked. She was quiet for a moment, then whispered, Rowan. Rowan more west, more from me, so he remembers where it all began. Julian nodded, resting his forehead against her hair. I love it. Strong, but gentle. That night they returned to Boston. Julian asked her to meet him on the rooftop to see the view. When Elena stepped out, she found him standing beneath the golden lights, his face bathed in a kind of stillness she'd never seen, like the moment itself was sacred. The breeze played with his shirt, and in his hands a velvet box rested, open, waiting. I know we started this as an agreement, Julian said, but this, what we built, it's love, real love. And I don't want to wait one more day to call you my family. Elena was crying before he even asked. Please just ask, she whispered. Julian smiled, kneeling down. Elena Moore, will you marry me, not because of the baby, but because of us? Yes, she said. 1,000 times yes. The days after the wedding passed like a soft dream. Elena and Julian moved into their new home. Every window, every creak of the floorboards felt soaked in beginnings. The small room at the end of the hallway was now complete. A white crib, bear-shaped pillows, a hand-woven rug, and a shelf filled with fairy tales. Every evening, Julian sat beside Elena in the rocking chair, hand resting on her round belly, both of them watching the quiet shifts beneath the fabric. Who do you think he'll look like? Elena asked. Hopefully you, Julian smiled. At least in patience. She laughed softly, head resting against his shoulder. Happiness didn't come with fireworks or diamond rings. It came in quiet evenings and shared heartbeats. Elena was 38 weeks pregnant when the first pain came one rainy morning. At first, just a faint cramp, but by the second wave, she had to grip the chair for support. Julian was at her side instantly, eyes wide but voice calm. It's time, isn't it? She nodded. Their hospital bag had been ready for a week. They got in the car, Julian's hand never leaving hers during the drive. Things progressed faster than they expected. Within hours, the pain became relentless, contractions crashing like waves. Elena squeezed Julian's hand, tears falling freely, from fear, from exhaustion. I don't know if I can do this, she gasped. You've done harder things, Julian whispered, forehead to hers. You chose to love me. You chose to build a family. You are the bravest thing I've ever known. A sob rose in her throat, not from pain, but from the truth in his words. That was all the strength she needed. At 2:11 a.m., a cry broke the silence of the room. The doctor laid a tiny boy onto her chest, soft, trembling, and completely perfect. Julian stood frozen for a moment, then slowly stepped closer. Rowan, he whispered, welcome to the world. The first week at home was chaos, sleepless nights, diapers, bottles, but through it all, a kind of love they'd never known. Julian held their son every evening, pressing him against his chest so he could hear his father's heartbeat. Elena read stories even though Rowan didn't yet understand. They learned to be parents, not perfectly, but completely. One night with Rowan fast asleep, Elena rested her head on Julian's chest and whispered, Do you ever wonder, what if I'd said no that first day? Julian held her closer. I think there would have always been an ache in my chest I couldn't explain, and our son wouldn't have the gentlest mother in the world. I didn't say yes because you asked, she replied. I said yes because somewhere deep inside, I knew you were home. Outside the window, wind nudged the wind chimes softly, and in that quiet room, 3 heartbeats blended into one. A family needing no further definition.